crisis disrupts the normal course of life, and religious or spiritual giving is not exempt, as most crises affect our finances directly or indirectly. In many places, crisis altars established giving habits by preventing people from physically bringing the tithes and offerings to the church building. Furthermore, crisis creates the perception that the church is out of business, hence not needing resources. In this context, I will ask my colleagues, Hiskia and Aniel, how can we uphold a giving spirit?
It is not a one-answer question, but all can do something, since giving is a spiritual act. Spiritually nurturing members under all circumstances is a basic requirement. As during a crisis, people struggle with scarcity, it's important to remind everyone about the faithful provider and instruct them about managing resources wisely.
I'll mention two things. Entities that have diversified means of giving, electronic or else, are faring better in times of crisis. Another thing, if a church remains on the front line of mission and communicates about it, it has a more persuasive argument to appeal for giving. You can read more about sustaining uplifting giving during a time of crisis in an issue of the dynamic Steward magazine.
Thank you for those interesting ideas. Today, the Stewardship Ministry Department invites you to consider one decisive factor, among many others, that can make a difference. Have you ever thought about how your church or field will thrive during a future crisis if all members will become promisers? By the way, what does it mean?
Well, promisers are those who have vowed to exercise their trust in the Lord by regularly returning to Him a percentage of their income as offering, in addition to the tithe.
But isn't the tithe enough?
Not really. According to Malachi chapter 3 verses 8 through 10, both are equally required by God, and the absence of one of them will configure dishonesty against Him.
Okay, but how are they different?
Well, the tithe has a specific percentage stipulated by God, 10%. On the other hand, He leaves it up to each of us individually to decide the percentage to be given as promise.
I see.
Another difference is that while the tithe must be used exclusively for supporting the authorized ministry, offerings should cover a wider range of other important necessities for the spreading of the gospel around the world.
Gotcha.
But why do you ask? Were you a little intrigued?
Well, no. It's just that sometimes I feel like God is calling me to take a step of faith, to become a promiser. And I think it will help me to be more consistent, giving offerings as regularly as God's blessings are and not according to my heart, or according to my sympathy, projects, or special calls, but every time He blesses.
I think you're on the right track.
Well, I must head out now, but I appreciate your explanation.
No problem, girl, anytime.
All right, bye.
Bye.
To become a promiser means to honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Proverbs 3:9-10.
As you have just watched, those who have become promisers will give offerings in proportion to their income, which is a more consistent way to give. Therefore, they will give offerings as regularly as they return the tithe. That is, they will return offerings as regularly as God blesses them. They are no longer dependent on appeals from the pulpit, sympathy for missionaries or missionary projects, impulse, or the changing feelings of the heart. Instead, they will regularly give offerings back to God in recognition that they have received something from Him. It is an exercise of trust in God's ability to provide. By the way, are you already a promiser? have you already decided in prayer about a percentage to give back to Him as a regular offering, apart from the tithe, as regularly as He has blessed you? Now, Aniel, do you believe that it is appropriate to ask members to give when they are being hurt by crisis?
Well, crisis hurts people to various degrees. Asking someone to give an amount of money, even a small amount, can seem insensitive. In contrast, inviting believers to become promisers, which implies giving as a percentage of received income, is a sign of respect for others' reality. It removes the guilt of not being able to give when there is no income.
Thank you, Aniel. We will now see why the practice of the promise concept is so appropriate even during the times of crisis. Are members supposed to give even when they have lost their income?
Let's say you are already committed to be a tither and a promisor, but the only thing is that, well, you don't have any income. What should you do? Are you expected to find a way to get money anyway so that you may fulfill your vows? Should you sell something you own in order to give? Ask your boss for an advance? Borrow money from a friend? Can someone still be considered a tither and a promisor without having an income? Of course. The idea is pretty simple. Being a tither and a promisor is a decision made from a heart that accepts God as the owner and source of all material blessings. This acceptance depends on your submission to Him and to His Word. It's not about money. God will never expect tithe and promise from someone who hasn't received anything from Him. Once again, we don't tithe in order to be blessed. Actually, we tithe because we have already been blessed. Same thing goes for your promise. In both cases, a previously established percentage is offered from what you receive from God. So the tithe for zero income is zero. The promise for zero income is, once again, zero. And in this case, even when you return nothing, you're still considered faithful. But hey, there is something you can do about it. You may pray to the Lord and remind Him that you are already a tither and a promisor, that following His word, you will return to Him as tithe and promise determined percentages of all that He will give you. Then, ask Him to give you an income if He wants you to help forwarding His work in this world. For we know that every giving starts with God's giving. The Lord upholds all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look expectantly to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. Psalm 145, verses 14 through 16.
As we just watched, God will never expect us to give something if He has not given us something before. So maybe the most essential thing to do as we prepare for future crises is to educate church members on the concept of promise, which is regular and systematic percentage-based giving. All other kinds of spiritual giving, project giving for example, should come in addition to regular and systematic giving.
In the final part of our presentation, we will see how regular and systematic giving, which we call promise, and an appropriate system of distribution of offerings may impact the church's mission.
At the right time and with a solemn purpose, the Adventist movement was raised as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ. Its divine mission is to proclaim the everlasting gospel to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, telling them to fear God and give glory to Him because the hour of His judgment has come. All who dwell on the earth should also be invited to worship God as the creator of heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water. In Acts 1:8, Jesus indicates 3 geographic segments that must be reached by this missionary endeavor: Jerusalem, all Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. Since the beginning, the church's pioneers understood that this enormous task could not be accomplished by one individual or by fragmented and disconnected church unities. They knew that the only way to achieve this objective was by emulating the apostolic church, being and working with one accord, and having all things in common. So, to reach every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, they organized the remnant of the Advent movement as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where missionary strategies are decided not by one mind, but collectively through committees. Its members are elected by the whole body, and all resources, the tithes and offerings, are gathered in one place and distributed equitably, following collective decisions and strategies according to the biblical Storehouse principle. This unified effort is crucial to the accomplishment of this end-time commission to illuminate the whole world with the everlasting gospel before Jesus comes. And how are our offerings distributed so that every nation, tribe, tongue, and people can be invited to fear God and worship Him as Creator? In 2002, the World Church suggested the Combined Offering Plan, which is already adopted by 12 administrative regions or world fields. While the destinations of offerings suggested by the givers are always respected, this offering plan proposes that all non-assigned offerings should be automatically distributed following the geographical missionary segments mentioned by Jesus in Acts 1:8. So, 50 to 60% of all non-assigned offerings stay at the local level, usually the local church. 20 to 30% of all non-assigned offerings are applied to regional mission, usually administered by the conference or mission. And 20% of all non-assigned offerings are administered by the General Conference and applied to the world mission. While following the Combined Offering Plan guidance, offerings are distributed to support all approved projects, initiatives, ministries, and regions of the world. On the other hand, assigned offerings that should ideally be given only in addition to the unassigned ones can only cover the assigned project or destination, leaving all the others uncovered. According to this distribution plan, church members are invited to worship God by regularly bringing Him their promise, which is their regular and systematic offering given after the tithe. Promise is a regular offering because it is given after every income or increase. It is systematic because it is given under a proportional system, a previously decided or vowed percentage of every income. Promise offering is given not just when there is a call or a need, but every time members recognize that they were blessed by the Lord with an income. They give as an act of worship and not as a donation, not to be blessed, but as a grateful response to the blessing. As important as it is, the tithe is a very restricted fund because it can be used only according to God's specific guidance in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. So tithe funds can only cover a limited part of the missionary's expenses. Offerings, on the other hand, are an unrestricted fund and can cover all kinds of missionary needs. This distribution system of offerings, resembling the tithe distribution system, is based on mutual submission and mutual trust. It will allow our missionary work to receive an uninterrupted flow of resources that will be regulated by God Himself as He keeps blessing His people financially. By giving promise, non-assigned regular and systematic offerings, or by distributing your offering according to the pattern suggested by the Combined Offering Plan, you are providing the necessary leverage that will bring the everlasting gospel to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come.